Around the time when the movies that comprise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe were starting to gain momentum among movie viewers, fans, actors, and actresses within the industry, Marvel executives decided to expand their influence to make Japanese animated features based on the characters within the Marvel Comics as well. Announced at the 2009 San Diego Comic Convention, it was promoted as a quote-unquote entire parallel universe for Marvel, said the then president of Marvel International. But upon final release, the product was far from the original promises and had poor reception in Japan and abroad, and is now all but completely forgotten. How could have things gone so wrong? The concept. The Marvel anime would be a single-season series based on some of the properties of the Marvel Universe, being Iron Man, Wolverine, X-Men, and Blade, released in that order. If reception to those series were good, then possibly more seasons would be made for them, as well as possibly different new adaptations. But none of this occurred, and there are a few reasons why. Interpretation of source material. During the press conference at the comic convention, news information said that former Madhouse president and CEO Jungo Maruta, Marvel gave the anime studio free rein to reimagine the Marvel superheroes for Japanese audiences. So this naturally meant that they could interpret the characters in any way they desired. So quality control and oversight in terms of story could vary greatly from series to series, and without any real lack of direction or assistance from Marvel Studios could mean easily that the series in question would be subpar in terms of quality, which later happened, but was not admitted to at the time. The Iron Man anime being released in late 2010 was chosen in part due to the first Iron Man film being released in 2008, and fan reception to the character in Japan was the highest out of the series selected. Added to this, the trailer release also showed an impressive quality performance, and viewers were excited as to what could be done and the overall possibilities with the concept. Sadly, this was not the case, as much online discussion and disappointment once the anime was actually released revealed that the trailer had nothing to do with the actual anime that was presented. In the following months and years, viewers complained of a bait and switch, with Madhouse promising something and the result being something entirely different. The series plot is also regarded as among the most weak in terms of quality or relatability to the source material, and disappointment with the fact that nearly no references to the comic were made in the Iron Man anime. The only thing that was Iron Man within the anime was Tony Stark. Being released in early 2011, Wolverine being chosen due to 20th Century Fox's reliance on Hugh Jackman for movie revenue, as well as responding to the poorly conceived X-Men films of the time. Wolverine had little to no relation to the character from the comics as well. One fact mentioned is during the ending credits of the series, Sabretooth is seen during the display, but never actually shown during the series. Some analysts believe that a second season would have had the character brought in some form, but this was never done. The X-Men anime being released in early 2011, around the time of X-Men First Class, the anime had the most positive reception because the villains from the comics, the Hellfire Club, had been adapted into the anime. The animation of the series were also cited as being among the best of all the adaptations, and most well received within Japan and internationally. Blade, being released in late 2011, also had mixed to negative reception. The anime relied heavily on the Wesley Snipes films of the late 1990s. Not much else had good reception from the adaptation for the Japanese viewers. Emphasizing further the concept of Japanese for Japanese viewership is the fact that all of the anime series were based in Japan and focused heavily on Japanese themes. Examples are Iron Man comes to Japan in reason for completion of a reactor, which is key to the series. A new character, Chia Tanaka, was specifically created to anchor Tony to Japan, and the character had mixed to negative reception from viewers. Wolverine in the comics has old ties to Japan and did the best out of the series of explaining why he was in Japan. Yukio, Omega Red, and Shingun, classic characters from this series, anchor the character for his reason being in Japan. But besides those small facts, the series does not have much redemption in terms of plot. For the X-Men series, new characters were created just for the anime adaptation, being brought in as an anchor for X-Men being in Japan. In terms of story plot, online reviews mention that there wasn't much redemption for the series besides the witty use of the Hellfire Club. Blade is also weak in terms of reason for the character being in Japan, due to the story being heavily improvised as well as new characters brought in once again for plot anchoring. The idea was, for Madhouse, is that if everything is set in Japan, the audience would possibly automatically relate to it better. And even with this, the reception to this assumption were mixed. Though some of the Japanese audience did relate to the stories being in Japan and the reimagining of the characters by a major Japanese animation studio or properties, the original source material had plenty excited with the concept, and many did desire a more faithful representation of the characters from the comics. Because of the anime being influenced by and for the Japanese viewership audience, when it was broadcasted in America and Europe, the translation and transfer of ideas weren't necessarily as good in terms of relatability and overall reception. Critics would say that though the series adaptation were good in terms of quality, they could have been great if the stories or events from the comics had been adopted instead of Madhouse improvisations. As one online analyst mentioned, quote, "All we got from Marvel was good animation. The stories for the adaptations were meaningless and would easily be forgotten." End quote. More than 10 years after the Marvel anime, all we have now are just forgotten stories and thoughts, possibilities of what could have been.